560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. America First with Sebastian Gorka. Today at 3, right before Sean Thompson at 4 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Tucker Carlson's interview on by Russell Brand for Russell Brand's podcast covered a lot of territory, as we've talked about, a number of the topics covered. One of them that we haven't was Tucker's decision to take his act to Twitter. Here's what he had to say about that.
Well, I don't work for Elon. He's paid me zero money. I don't think I ever want to work for anyone again. I've done that. I'd like to make money. I mean, I think that's fair. I've made zero money since I left, and that's fine. But at some point I'd like to, but I'm not working for Elon Musk. He hasn't offered to hire me, and if he did, I wouldn't accept. But what he's done is offered me what he's offered every other user of Twitter, which is a chance to broadcast your views without a gatekeeper there. But I do think, I think the technology at Twitter is, my expectation, is evolving, and I think, the subscription model might work, or it might not. I don't know, but I think it might. And I plan to stay there. But what social media offer in the short term, at least for me, is an audience, but also a reason, this is personal, but a reason to write. I can't think clearly without writing. I started in this business as a magazine writer and a book writer, newspaper writer, and I need to write things out. I'm very dyslexic, and I can't, I have trouble processing information in certain ways. And unless I'm forced to write a script, I can't really decide what I think about something. And so the daily or regular discipline of writing a script forces me, and in some cases it really is forced. I don't want to do it. I'd much rather go fishing or bird hunting. I would. But if I have to, I will. And there's something wonderful in that. Writing a script, as you know, forces you to think through everything about the issue, to have a much deeper understanding of it. At least for me, that's true. So, I just on a side note, I like the perspective on the discipline of writing, forcing you to think and to put together a cogent argument, and it generates a better understanding of the particular topic and the point that you're trying to make, so that you make it succinctly and cogently. But the piece about taking it to Twitter, taking his act to Twitter with his commentaries and now some interviews that he's starting to post, and that the opportunity was to be able to express himself without a gatekeeper. That's the promise that Elon Musk made, and he's not just making it to Tucker Carlson. It seems to me that that's the promise university presidents should be making. That's the promise that school boards and administrators should be making. Or, as we've discussed before, simply take Supreme Court First Amendment jurisprudence and make that the culture at your institution. Right? Normative. Make it the normative culture at your institution, consistent with the first freedoms as enshrined in the Constitution. It just doesn't seem that complicated. But of course it is complicated, because for all of those pronouncements about protecting our democracy, those who are prone to make them are the ones who don't have nearly the respect for our first freedoms as they should, including with respect to young people, and including in places that promise to be marketplaces of ideas. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Samantha Harris and Michael Allen. Allen Harris Law is the firm. These are two lawyers who are spending a lot of their time and employing their legal expertise in advance of students' first freedoms, as well as faculty and staff's first freedoms on college campuses across America. Samantha Harris, Michael Allen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So, give us for sort of a general overview of where you think protecting our democracy and allowing young people to express themselves, or administrators, faculty to express themselves. Where is that on a college campus today, in your estimation, and is it trending in a positive or negative direction?
Well, I'll
Lisa,
hop
you
in
want
on
to
this
take
one
this?
because yeah. So, prior to starting this firm, I spent 15 years working at a nonprofit organization that was dedicated to addressing issues of student and faculty free speech and due process rights. And I have to say, over the past, I want to say, gosh, it's 2023. So, the past 15 years or so, things have really been trending down after a period where I thought they were getting better. And what's really interesting has been the shift from where those demands for censorship are coming from. Because when I first started out doing this, it was kind of top down. You had college administrations that were really chilling students and faculty members, but really largely students' First Amendment and free speech rights. And increasingly, and I think this is what is really distressing when you look towards the future, the demands for censorship are coming from the students themselves more and more, and the administration is following along and following their lead and not standing up to demands that protected speech be censored. So to see these demands coming, from the students themselves, as opposed to something that students are pushing back against, is unfortunately just, I think, really disheartening.
Well, right. I mean, and so I suppose that sort of 40 years of what we used to call political correctness on campus, which included speech codes. I mean, I'm dating back to when I was an undergrad, and we were talking about Donna Shalala's speech codes at the University of Wisconsin, for example, and that then permeating K through 12 education. So you've brought a generation or two now of kids up in this culture in K-12 and on college, where you're not supposed to have to endure opinions with which you disagree.
Yeah, and I'd like to step in here, Samantha, and say there's something else in addition to what you just said, and that is that many people on campus, not just the students, but the administrators and faculty as well, now feel that they have a right to have their subjective feelings validated at every turn, and they don't mind trampling all over the feelings of other people in their demands that be recognized, and somehow that you can be punished if whatever subjective whim you may have about something that was said perhaps offended you, perhaps made you feel, quote, uncomfortable, which is a complaint we find all the time. And I'll just give you some examples because I think you'll recognize that they're hallucinatory. There was a student at the Yale Law School who had people over to his house for fried chicken and some other things, and having fried chicken was considered to be racist or things like this. There are any numbers of examples we could give you where just simply ordinary discourse, if it's construed in the absolutely worst possible light, could be tortured out of recognition, that could be construed as something offensive. But if someone is going to those lengths to subjectively feel offended, they are, in a sense, offending themselves. No one can control the subjective thoughts or impressions of another. But the apparatus on campus, and unfortunately not only on campus, because as people like Andrew Sullivan have said, it increasingly seems that we are all on campus now, no matter what we do, if we work for Spotify or Netflix or whatnot. That to me is a very disturbing principle, because you can't recognize, that is the opposite of freedom, to impose the requirement that other people's subjective beliefs or impressions of ordinary language must be taken as true somehow, especially when those are interpreted in the utmost bad faith.
So what happened to the professor who had kids or students over for fried chicken?
It was not a professor, it was a student at the Yale Law School. And in that particular case, he was able to record, this is not our client, by the way.
Okay.
but he was able to record a meeting with the administrators and embarrass the administration because they urged him to apologize. They hinted that things would go badly in his legal career if he did not, and he refused to apologize. And then the administrators proactively apologized for him to the entire student body of the Yale Law School, which is my alma mater, incidentally. And luckily, he was able to take that tape public and embarrass the school. And yet, although they were threatening his career, right, nothing happened to their careers. They're still there. And we see this over and over again as well.
Well, we saw that at Stanford Law with that diversity administrator, intervening between law school students at Stanford Law and a sitting federal judge. I mean, it's the same sort of thing where they can't hear a cross word or they can't disagree with a particular opinion in a particular case or on a particular issue.
Right.
With a sitting federal judge. You're a law student. You have this opportunity to talk to a federal judge. I mean, even back when I was in law school, that would be seen. Oh, this is going to be interesting, and I'm gonna show him I'm a smarter legal mind than he is, or so on and so forth. But it wouldn't be devolving into this food fight that happened at Stanford Law.
Right, and at least the dean of the
Absolutely.
Stanford Law School, you're right, came out with a very strong statement in defense of freedom of thought, free speech, academic freedom on campus.
Right, and then all those kids,
other
and then
schools have
all those kids that threw the temper tantrum at the judge threw the temper tantrum outside her office.
Well, and they're going to be attorneys, and I think that's one of the other extremely disturbing things to me is that when I first sort of got into this business of addressing these issues at colleges and universities, we used to think, and people used to say, well, let's just wait till these people get into the real world. But what we've actually seen happening is the quote-unquote real world evolving to accommodate this type of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So no longer is it that your boss is just going to immediately shut this down. That if you show up for your first day of work and you try to pull at work what you were pulling on campus, that your boss is going to shut it down. No, your boss is going to find him or herself on the receiving end of an HR investigation, which is why our practice, although aimed at colleges and universities, has ended up sort of bleeding over into employment law as well, because what you see is the people who are coming up through the educational system with this idea that and just to sort of distill what Mike explained down into kind of a buzzword that we hear nowadays, this world where it's impact over intent, right? Where it doesn't matter what you meant when you said something. What matters is how someone else took it, right? Which means you constantly have to be on eggshells in fear of the most sensitive person in the room. But we
this
see
is
that
what I
now.
call let no subjective feelings be left behind, basically.
Yeah, right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I
right.
enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, but
So we see it in the workplace now too.
Oh,
And I think of it
course.
particularly maybe because I'm in the legal profession, but you're talking about these Stanford students. They're going to be lawyers. We have to deal with difficult and offensive things and often people every day. And the idea that you could train people to be legal professionals with the expectation that they're never going to encounter ideas or people who offend them is just completely absurd.
What do you think? Exactly. How do you think real clients talk in the world? People who are working class, in the trades. You think you're going to be able to deal with those clients and insist that they never say anything offensive to you?
No, I mean, hopefully some of those. I mean, I won't say hopefully, but you know what I'm saying is that hopefully they'll get a little bit of a talking to by people who live in the real world. Wake them.
You would hope.
Snap them out of it. But here's the thing. So rather than cultures on campuses and in corporate settings that reflect First Amendment jurisprudence, what we have is a culture that reflects Stasi dispositions, like that Yale student. The Yale student has to go into tape an administrator who's pressuring them to participate in a lie in order to embarrass the school, in order to get them to relent. I mean, this is sickness. Right. So other than if we're not attorneys like you are doing this legal work, I mean, what do you say to people? So well, how can we change this culture that you're describing? You're doing it through the court system.
Well,
How can other people participate?
I think
Well,
something
I think-
Ross Dow
Oh,
thought.
sorry,
oh,
go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say
Sorry,
really
well,
quickly,
what I
Ross
was
Dow
gonna say is
thought
there-
had a. Go, Sam, go.
You lawyers, everybody, wants to get their.
I know.
Yeah. All right, no,
Well,
go.
I'll be
go,
very
yeah.
quick, and
Yeah.
I'll be very quick, and then Mike can jump in, because what I was going to say is the biggest thing that ordinary people can do is show courage in the face of this, because most people think that this is crazy, but they have
Right.
families to feed, they have to keep their jobs, and they're afraid to stand up for what they know is right. So I'll let Mike jump in, but that's my biggest piece of advice: is stand up for what you know is right, even if there's a cost, because the cost to not doing so is much too high. And I'm sorry, Mike, that I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that, I've been in a disturbing number of institutions of higher education, having been a PhD student in the 90s during the first wave of political correctness, and then going back to law school after half a career in academia and having taught in, several universities. They're not recognizable to me anymore, either as a student or as a professor. And I think one thing that Ross Douthat said is, in the 19th century, we had Carnegie, Vanderbilt, these kind of characters running around with their fortunes, founding new universities, partly because if you know anything about the history of, say, technical universities, institutes of technology, things like that, these were founded at that time because there was a perceived need to have new institutions of higher education that were going to serve the needs of what they considered at that time a newly emerging modern society, right? The society of electrification, of mass production, of the rise of America to a status as a leading industrial nation. And the old line institutions were conservative, stodgy, and weren't really serving the interests of society. I think right now, as Ross Douthat mentioned in his book, I think it was titled Decadence, if I'm not mistaken, but where are these magnets of industry founding new universities? I think there's only a couple that I know of, like Austin University, or the University of Austin, I believe it's called. I think we need new universities that can do two things: create a market for professor jobs, academic jobs, where people can leave, move to a new place, where institutions, same for students, right, that they can leave and go to institutions where the freedom of inquiry is fostered and it is not stifled, where they are not larding up and taking away your tuition dollars by funding an ever bloated administration, which doesn't really do anything and at worst suppresses academic freedom and the freedom of inquiry. I think that really should be a pressing concern if you're an Elon Musk type character, or Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg, or these kinds of individuals.
Samantha Harris, Michael Allen, the Allen Harris Law Firm, fighting for the rights of students, faculty, and staff on campuses across America, and now into corporate settings, as you heard as well. Samantha Harris and Michael Allen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having me.
you.
Thank you. Excuse me. And they joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Are you turning 65 and thinking about Medicare? Or are you over 65 and haven't enrolled yet because you still have coverage at work? Either way, Medicare done correctly will be the best health insurance you will ever have. Imagine having nationwide access with an annual deductible of only $226. There are only two good things about aging: wisdom